He returned to the snow-covered hill, with only one purpose: to sell the old wooden mansion he had tried to forget for years. But on the very first day, his dog stopped at the door, as if this place had never truly ended. An aging house. Yet strangers began to arrive, carrying stories he never intended to be part of. As the days passed, he realized he wasn't just repairing the house. He was mending something broken inside himself.
I can't believe
Until one moment,
You're actually
when they were
here.
all forced to stand for each
made
other,
it, sweetheart.
and he finally understood
finally made
what
it
he had
home.
almost lost. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 followers, so we can keep sharing meaningful stories. Now, let's begin the story. The road into Everpine Ridge did not welcome people. It simply allowed them in. Adrian Hale kept both hands steady on the wheel of his old pickup truck as the tires pressed through a thin crust of late-season snow. The sky above was pale and wide, the kind of northern light that never quite warmed anything it touched. It revealed, it sharpened, it made every shadow feel deliberate. The town sign appeared without ceremony. Everpine Ridge, population 1,126. The number felt too exact, too intentional, as if someone had counted every person just to make sure the place still existed. Adrian didn't slow, not at first. Beside him, Ranger shifted his weight slightly on the passenger seat. The German Shepherd sat upright, alert but not tense, his sable coat catching the cold light in muted shades of cream, gray, and black. His amber eyes remained forward, fixed on the road ahead. Not searching, not excited, just aware. Ranger had always been like that. 6 years old now. Built lean and strong, not bulky, with a quiet precision in every movement. He had worked alongside Adrian in places where silence mattered more than courage, where a single mistake could echo for years. The dog didn't bark without reason, didn't react without thought. That was why Adrian noticed when Ranger's ears tilted forward just slightly as the road curved. "Yeah," Adrian muttered under his breath, his voice rough from disuse. "I feel it too." But he didn't. Not yet. Not in the way the dog did. The road narrowed as it climbed. Pine trees thickened along the edges, their branches heavy with old snow that hadn't yet decided to leave. The air outside looked clean enough to cut, the kind of cold that didn't just sit on your skin, it pressed inward. Adrian exhaled slowly. He had been in colder places. Places where the air carried the smell of fuel and iron, where silence wasn't peace, just the space between decisions. He adjusted his grip on the wheel, the worn leather of his gloves creasing softly. The truck engine hummed. Steady. Predictable. Unlike everything else. He hadn't planned to come back. That part was simple. The letter had found him instead. A legal envelope forwarded through 3 different addresses, each one a place he hadn't stayed long enough to remember properly. Inside it, a name he hadn't said out loud in years. Margaret Hale, his grandmother. The only person who had ever waited for him without asking why he left. He hadn't made it back in time. The thought moved through him like a quiet blade. Not sharp anymore, just familiar. Beside him, Ranger shifted again. Adrian glanced over. The dog's posture had changed, not dramatically, just enough to matter. His shoulders were slightly forward now, at his nose lifting just a fraction as if testing something in the air. "What is it?" Adrian asked, though he didn't expect an answer. Ranger didn't look at him. He never did when something mattered, The road opened suddenly, and there it was, the hill. Adrian slowed this time, not because he meant to, because something in his body had already decided. The house sat at the top like it had been placed there carefully, years ago, and then forgotten by everything except the wind. A large wooden structure, 2 stories, steep roof, wide front porch. The kind of place built to endure winters, not impress neighbors. The wood had aged into a muted gray-brown, softened by time and weather. The porch railing leaned just slightly. One section of the roof carried a darker patch where repairs had been attempted and then left incomplete. But the windows were clean. Not recently, not perfectly, but clean enough to suggest someone had cared about what could be seen from inside. Adrian pulled the truck to a stop. The engine idled. Neither of them moved. Ranger stood first, not jumping out, not scratching at the door. He simply placed one paw against it, then paused. His ears angled forward, his body still. And then quietly, almost reluctantly, he stepped back. Refused to get out. Adrian frowned slightly. "That's new," he said. Ranger had never hesitated before, not in places that mattered. Adrian reached for the handle and opened the door. Cold air rushed in immediately, sharp enough to sting. He stepped out, boots crunching softly against the thin layer of snow. The silence up there was different. Not empty. Just waiting. He walked around the truck and opened the passenger door. "Come on." Ranger remained where he was, for a second longer than made sense. Then, slowly, the dog stepped down. His paws touched the ground without sound. He didn't shake off the cold, didn't stretch. He simply stood beside Adrian, his gaze fixed on the house. Not wary, not afraid, just certain. Adrian followed his line of sight. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's it." The house. The thing he had come to deal with. To sell. To leave behind. Clara Whitmore was already waiting on the porch. She stood near the door with the stillness of someone who had spent a lifetime in places where patience mattered. Mid-50s, perhaps older, though it was difficult to tell. Her posture was straight, her movements economical. Her hair silver blonde, cut neatly at the jaw, caught the light in soft strands. Her face was composed, not cold, but practiced in not giving more than necessary. She wore a dark wool coat, buttoned fully despite the climb, and held a leather folder tucked under one arm. "Mr. Hale," she said as Adrian approached. Her voice carried easily in the quiet air. "Adrian," he corrected. She nodded once. "Of course." Her eyes moved to Ranger briefly, assessing, not lingering. "Good dog," she added, not as a compliment, but as a statement. Ranger didn't react. Adrian almost smiled. "Most things worth keeping are," he said. Clara considered that, then gave a small neutral incline of her head. "Your grandmother thought so?" The words landed lightly, but they stayed. Inside, the house smelled like wood, old fabric, and something faintly herbal lavender, maybe, or something close to it. Not fresh, not stale. Preserved. Adrian stepped in slowly. Nothing had been moved. The coat rack by the door still held a thick winter jacket, his grandmother's. The same one she had worn every winter he could remember. The sleeves slightly worn at the cuffs, the fabric softened from years of use. The table by the wall held a small ceramic bowl filled with keys. Too many keys. Adrian's chest tightened, just slightly. She kept everything, Clara said, watching him without intruding. She believed in usefulness. Adrian nodded. That sounded like her. They moved into the living room. Large, open, windows facing the valley below. So Clara opened the folder. The property, she began, has increased in value significantly over the past 5 years. The development interest alone. Adrian didn't hear the rest, not really. His eyes had settled on the far corner of the room. A chair, old, wooden, worn smooth at the arms. He remembered that chair. His grandmother had sat there every evening, waiting. Not for anything specific, just in case. He swallowed, harder than necessary. Clara's voice continued, calm, precise. However, the maintenance costs are considerable. The roof requires attention, the heating system is outdated, and the property tax. I'm selling it, Adrian said. The words came out clean. Too clean. Clara paused, studied him. You're certain? Adrian didn't answer immediately. Ranger had moved further into the room now, his steps slow, deliberate. He circled once, then stopped near the center of the floor, his head turned slightly, not toward Adrian, toward the hallway leading deeper into the house, as if something had called him. Adrian felt it then. Not memory, not quite. Something else. Quieter, more dangerous. I'm not staying, Adrian said finally. Clara nodded once, as if confirming something she had already expected. Very well, she said. We can begin the process immediately. Her tone was neutral, efficient, final. Adrian looked around the room one last time. At the chair. The coat. The silence. He had come here to leave. That part was still true. But something had shifted. Not enough to stop him. Not yet. Just enough to make the leaving heavier. Behind him, Ranger remained still, watching the hallway, as if the house had not finished with them. The house did not feel empty the next morning. It should have. Adrian woke before the light had fully settled over the hill, his body still tied to an old rhythm that had nothing to do with civilian life. The silence pressed in around him, but it wasn't hollow. It carried weight, soft, patient, like something that had learned how to wait without asking. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the upstairs room, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the worn wooden floorboards. The air smelled faintly of cold wood and something older, something that didn't belong to time so much as memory. Ranger was already awake. The German shepherd stood near the doorway, facing the hall, his body still and balanced. His ears flicked once at the faint creak of the house settling, then stilled again. His amber eyes tracked something Adrian couldn't see. You're up early, Adrian muttered. Ranger didn't move. He rarely did when something held his attention. Adrian exhaled slowly and pushed himself to his feet. The cold bit at his skin immediately, even inside the house. He pulled on his old tactical combat shirt, the olive fabric soft from years of wear, the cuffs slightly frayed, and tugged the sleeves down over his wrists. The red thermal underneath carried just enough warmth to keep the edge off. Downstairs, the house greeted him the same way it had the night before. Unchanged. The coat still hung where it had been. The bowl of keys remained untouched. Light filtered in through the windows in thin, pale strips that didn't quite reach the corners of the room. He moved through it carefully, not out of caution, but out of something closer to respect. As if noise might disturb more than dust. The knock at the door came just after the sun cleared the tree line. Firm. Practical. not hesitant. Adrian paused, one hand resting on the edge of the kitchen counter. Ranger's head turned toward the door immediately, his posture shifting, not alarmed but attentive. "Guess we're not invisible after all," Adrian said quietly. He opened the door. The woman standing there did not look like someone who waited to be invited in. Martha Ellison stood with her weight balanced evenly on both feet, as if she had spent a lifetime on uneven ground and learned not to trust it. She was in her mid-50s, maybe older, her frame lean but strong, the kind of strength that came from work rather than intention. Her hair dark once, now streaked heavily with gray, was pulled back into a low knot at the nape of her neck. Loose strands framed a face lined not by age alone, but by restraint. Her eyes were a pale gray, steady and direct. "You're up," she said. Not a question. Adrian nodded once. "Yes." "Oh, ma'am?" She didn't react to the formality, just shifted her gaze slightly past him, taking in the interior of the house with a quick, practiced glance. "Good," she said. "Then you can help me carry this." She stepped aside, revealing a crate on the porch. Adrian blinked once. "What is it?" "Food," Martha replied. "What does it look like?" Her tone wasn't sharp, just efficient. Adrian hesitated for half a second long enough to remember that he didn't owe anyone anything here. Then he stepped forward anyway. The crate was heavier than it looked. He lifted it without comment and carried it inside, setting it down on the kitchen table. The wood creaked softly under the weight. Martha followed him in without waiting. She removed her gloves slowly, methodically, tucking them into the pocket of her worn green coat. "You'll want to check the pipes before the next freeze," she said, already moving toward the sink. "Your grandmother kept them from bursting more than once." "But the insulation's old." Adrian leaned against the table slightly, arms folded. "I'm not staying," he said. The words came easier this time, more practiced. Martha didn't look at him. She turned on the tap, let it run for a moment, watched the water settle into a steady stream. "Didn't say you were," she replied. Then she reached into the crate and began unpacking. Bread, canned goods, a jar of something homemade. She placed each item on the counter with quiet precision, as if she had done it here 100 times before. "People around here don't wait for invitations," she added. "Not when it comes to this house." Adrian frowned slightly. "This house isn't." "It was," Martha said, cutting him off gently. She turned then, meeting his gaze directly. "For a long time." Something in her voice shifted, not softer, not harder, just deeper. Adrian looked away first. Ranger had moved closer now. He approached Martha without hesitation, stopping just within arm's reach. His nose lifted slightly, testing the air around her. Not suspicious, not friendly. Evaluating. Martha glanced down at him. "Well," she said, "you brought the right kind of company." She extended a hand slowly. Ranger didn't move at first. Then, after a moment, he stepped forward and allowed her fingers to brush lightly against the side of his neck. Not affection. Permission. Martha nodded once, as if that confirmed something. "Good dog," she murmured. The next knock came an hour later. Louder this time. More uncertain. Adrian opened the door again to find a man standing awkwardly on the porch, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Lucas Reed looked like he had been built for work, and then left unfinished. Mid-40s, broad-shouldered, hands roughened by years of labor. His hair was a sun-faded brown, cut short but uneven, as if he trimmed it himself when it became inconvenient. A light beard covered his jaw patchy in places, thicker along the chin, giving him a permanently tired look. Wore a red and black flannel shirt beneath a heavy brown work jacket, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. His boots were caked with dried mud. "You the Hale boy?" he asked. Adrian nodded once. "Adrian." Lucas scratched the back of his neck, glancing briefly past him into the house. "Heard you were fixing up the place," he said. "Figured I'd take a look at the roof before it decides to come down on you." Adrian crossed his arms. "I didn't ask for help." Lucas shrugged. "Didn't say you did." He stepped inside anyway. Not rudely, just like it made sense. As Lucas moved deeper into the house, Ranger suddenly froze. Not in the doorway, not near Adrian, in the center of the room. His head tilted slightly, ears forward. Then, without a sound, he turned and walked toward the hallway at the back of the house. Stopped, and sat, facing a closed door. As if someone had just called him. Adrian watched him, something tightening in his chest. "Ranger," he said quietly. No response. At Lucas followed his gaze. "That room always stayed shut," he muttered, almost to himself. Adrian looked at him. "What do you mean?" Lucas hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing that matters right now." He clapped his hands once, breaking the moment. "Roof first," he said. "Memories later." They worked through the morning. Lucas moved with the steady efficiency of someone who had spent a lifetime fixing things that didn't thank him for it. He climbed the ladder without hesitation, boots finding their place on the worn rungs. From above, his voice carried down in short, practical observations. "Shingles are loose on the west side. Gutters clogged. Whoever patched this last didn't care if it lasted." Adrian followed instructions without argument, handing tools, holding the ladder, adjusting where needed. It felt familiar. Not the work itself. The rhythm of it, simple, direct, no room for second guessing. For a while, he didn't think about anything else. By early afternoon, once the sun had shifted just enough to cast longer shadows across the yard, a car pulled up. Old, worn, reliable. The driver stepped out slowly, one hand resting briefly on the door as if steadying herself. Emily Carter looked younger than the others, early 30s, maybe, but carried the kind of exhaustion that didn't belong to age. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a loose tie, strands escaping around her face. Her skin was pale from the cold, her eyes a soft green that seemed permanently tired, but not defeated. She held a small toolbox in one hand. "I heard someone was fixing things," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "My door doesn't close right anymore." Adrian glanced at Lucas. Lucas shrugged. "Looks like you're in business." Adrian exhaled. Slowly. "I'm not..." Emily shifted her weight slightly, waiting. Not pushing, just there. Adrian looked at Ranger. The dog had returned from the hallway, now sitting near the edge of the porch, watching. Present. As always. Adrian ran a hand over the back of his neck. "Show me," he said. They walked down the hill together. The snow crunched under their boots. The air carried that same quiet, patient cold. Emily's house was small, modest, the kind of place that held together because someone refused to let it fall apart. Adrian stepped inside and examined the door. Simple problem. Warped frame. Fixable. He got to work without speaking much. Emily stayed nearby, watching, not hovering, just present. Your grandmother used to help people like this, she said after a while. Adrian didn't look up. I'm not her. I know, she replied. A pause. Then softer. But you're here. By the time they walked back up the hill, the light had begun to fade. Lucas had already packed up his tools. Martha's crate sat empty on the counter. The house felt different, not full, but no longer untouched. Adrian stood in the doorway, looking out over the valley. A ranger moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel, not touching, never needing to. Adrian exhaled slowly. I'm still selling it, he said. The words felt thinner now, less certain. Behind him, the house creaked softly, as if adjusting or remembering. The house changed in small ways. Not all at once, not enough for anyone passing by to notice. But Adrian did. It began with the sound of footsteps that didn't belong to him. Not literal footsteps, not the kind that echoed down hallways or creaked under weight. The house still held its silence too carefully for that. But there were movements now. Subtle shifts. The kind that came from doors opening more often, from air circulating through rooms that had once been closed, from people. Adrian stood in the kitchen early that morning, one hand wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug he had found in the cabinet. It wasn't his. None of it was. But the warmth seeped into his fingers anyway. The coffee was too strong. Or maybe he had just forgotten what normal tasted like. Outside, the sky carried that same pale northern light, but it felt different now. Less distant, as if the world had leaned a little closer overnight. Ranger lay near the doorway, head resting between his paws. His eyes were half closed, but not asleep. Never asleep in the full sense. One ear twitched occasionally, tracking the smallest sounds. The wind shifting through pine branches, the distant hum of a truck somewhere down the road. Adrian took another sip of coffee. The taste didn't improve. He set the mug down. The knock came again, this time softer, measured. Adrian didn't bother asking who it was before opening the door. The man standing there looked like someone who had spent his life working in places that didn't forgive mistakes. Tom Becker. Mid-40s, maybe pushing 50. Thick through the shoulders, but not in a way that suggested strength, more like weight that had settled in over time. His face was broad, weathered, the skin roughened by years of wind and sun. A short, uneven beard covered his jaw, streaked with gray. At his eyes were a dull brown, sharp in a way that came from habit, not curiosity. He wore a heavy brown work jacket, zipped halfway, a dark hoodie underneath. His jeans were worn at the knees, boots scuffed from use rather than neglect. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just stood there. You the one fixing the place? Tom asked. Adrian leaned slightly against the doorframe. Trying to. Tom nodded once, slow. Looks like it needed it. Not an insult, not quite a compliment either. Just a fact. Adrian waited. Tom shifted his weight, glancing briefly past him into the house. You planning on staying? He asked. There it was. Adrian didn't answer right away. I'm planning on selling, he said finally. Tom's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did, subtle, almost invisible, like a muscle tightening under the surface. Figures, he muttered. He took a step back. Just thought I'd see it before it turns into something else. Adrian frowned slightly. Something else? Tom shrugged. Everything does. Then he turned and walked away. No goodbye. No explanation. Just boots crunching against the snow, fading down the hill. Inside, the house felt quieter after he left. Not emptier, just more aware. Adrian closed the door slowly. Ranger had lifted his head. The dog watched the space where Tom had stood, his gaze steady, unreadable. Not tense, not relaxed. Observing. Yeah, Adrian said under his breath. That went well? Ranger blinked once, then lowered his head again. The rest of the morning passed in work. Simple things. Necessary things. Adrian moved through the house with tools in hand, tightening hinges, checking window seals, replacing loose boards on the porch. The rhythm of it settled into him the way breathing did. Automatic, grounding. It reminded him of something. Not the missions. Those had been too sharp, too precise. This was different. Quieter. But it carried the same clarity. Do what's in front of you. Don't overthink it. Don't look too far ahead. By midday, the sun had risen just enough to soften the edges of the cold. Adrian stepped outside, rolling his shoulders slightly, feeling the tension settle back into place. A car approached from down the hill, slower than usual. Careful. It stopped near the base of the driveway. The driver hesitated before stepping out. A man in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Tall, but not imposing. Lean in a way that suggested endurance rather than strength. His hair was dark, cut short but uneven, like it had been trimmed without a mirror. His face was narrow, clean-shaven, with a sharpness to the cheekbones that made him look more tired than he probably was. He wore a faded navy jacket, zipped up to the neck, and dark pants tucked into practical winter boots. One hand held a folded stack of papers, the other remained tucked into his pocket, as if unsure where it belonged. He walked up slowly, not hesitant, just deliberate. "Adrian Hale?" he asked. Adrian nodded. "That's me." The man extended the papers. "My name's Grant Miller," he said. "I handle small property grants for the county." His voice was steady, measured. The kind of voice that didn't rush because it didn't need to. "I used to know your grandmother." Adrian took the papers without looking at them. "Yeah?" Grant nodded. "She helped me once," he said. "Didn't ask for anything back." A pause. "I figured I'd return the favor." Adrian raised an eyebrow slightly. "By giving me paperwork?" Grant almost smiled. "By telling you that you've got options," he said. As Grant spoke, Ranger stood. Not abruptly, not aggressively. He moved past Adrian, walked down the porch steps, and stopped directly in front of Grant, close enough to feel his presence. Still. Silent. Then, slowly, the dog sat, facing him, holding his gaze. Grant didn't step back, didn't reach out. He simply looked down at the dog for a long second, then nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She would have liked you." Adrian watched the exchange, something tightening in his chest again. "What's this about?" he asked, tapping the papers lightly. Grant shifted his attention back. "There are programs," he said, "for properties like this. Historical, community use, things like that." Adrian frowned. "I'm not turning this into a museum." Grant shook his head. "Didn't say you were." He gestured slightly toward the house. "But places like this, they don't just belong to one person. Not entirely." Adrian's jaw tightened. "It belongs to me now." Grant didn't argue. Legally, he said. Another pause. Then, not always the same thing. The words settled in the air between them. Heavy. Uninvited. Adrian looked down at the papers in his hand. Didn't open them. Not yet. I'm selling, he said again. More firmly this time. Grant nodded once. I figured. He stepped back. If you change your mind, you'll know where to find me. He turned to leave. Then stopped. Your grandmother used to keep records, he added, of the people she helped. Might be worth looking at. Adrian's grip on the papers tightened slightly. I've seen them. Grant studied him for a moment, then shook his head. No, he said. You've seen the list. A beat. You haven't seen what it meant. Grant left without another word. The car engine started. Faded. Gone. Adrian stood there for a long moment, the papers still in his hand. Ranger remained at the edge of the porch, watching the road where the car had disappeared. Not moving, not reacting, just holding the moment. Adrian looked down at the documents, then back at the house, then out over the valley. The same view, the same light, but something had shifted. Again. Small, subtle, persistent, like pressure building in a place he couldn't quite reach. Inside, the house felt different, not louder, not warmer, just less willing to be ignored. Adrian set the papers on the table. I didn't open them. Not yet. He moved toward the hallway. Paused. For a second. Just a second. He glanced toward one of the doors. Closed. Unremarkable. But something about it held his attention longer than it should have. He exhaled slowly, shook his head, turned away. I'm still selling it, he said. The words echoed slightly in the room. Not loud, but clear. Ranger didn't respond. The dog simply walked back inside, circled once near the center of the room, and lay down, facing the hallway, as if the house had something left to say, and was willing to wait. The weather turned without warning. It always did in the north, but this time it felt personal. Adrian noticed it in the air before the sky changed, a pressure that settled low in his chest, the kind that had nothing to do with altitude or temperature. The wind shifted first quiet, almost polite slipping between the trees, like it didn't want to be heard. Ranger felt it before that. The dog had been restless since dawn, not pacing, not anxious, just unsettled. He moved through the house in slow, deliberate paths, stopping near windows, near doors, near places where the walls felt thinner. His ears tracked something distant, something Adrian couldn't hear yet. You expecting company? Adrian asked dryly. Ranger didn't respond. He stood near the front door, head slightly lowered, body still, waiting. By late morning, the sky had begun to close. Clouds gathered low and heavy, pressing down over the valley like a lid. The light changed, not dimmer, but flatter, as if the world had lost its depth. Adrian stood on the porch, arms folded, watching the tree line shift under the growing wind. He had seen storms before. Deserts, mountains, oceans. Each one carried its own language. This one spoke quietly, which made it worse. The first to arrive was Emily. She didn't knock. She pushed the door open just enough to step inside, a gust of cold air rushing in behind her. Her cheeks were flushed from the wind, strands of her blonde hair pulled loose from the tie at the back of her head. I think something's coming, she said. Adrian raised an eyebrow. You think? She gave him a look. Not annoyed, just Tired. I mean something worse than usual. He nodded once. I know. She hesitated, shifting her weight slightly. My heating's been acting up, she added. If it goes out. You can stay here, Adrian said. The words came out before he had time to weigh them. They hung in the air between them. Emily blinked. Just until it passes, he added, quieter. She nodded once. Thank you. Lucas arrived next, louder, more certain. His truck pulled up hard near the base of the hill, tires crunching over the frozen ground. He stepped out with the same steady confidence he carried into everything, like the world might break. But he wouldn't. Storm's rolling in fast, he called as he approached. Adrian leaned against the doorframe. I noticed. Lucas glanced at the sky, then back at the house. Good place to ride it out, he said. Not asking. Adrian stepped aside. Come in. By early afternoon, the wind had sharpened. Not violent yet, but insistent. The kind that didn't stop knocking. Martha came just before the first snow hit. She didn't speak when she entered. Didn't explain. She simply removed her coat, set it neatly by the door, and moved into the kitchen like she had always belonged there. Soup, she said, already reaching for a pot. Adrian watched her for a moment, then nodded. Good idea. The house filled slowly. Not with noise. With presence. Lucas moved through the rooms, checking windows, reinforcing latches, tightening anything that might give under pressure. His hands worked without hesitation, his movements efficient and practiced. Emily stayed near the kitchen, helping Martha without being asked. She moved quietly, carefully, her hands steady even as the wind outside began to rise. Adrian found himself moving between them, not leading, not directing, just part of it. Ranger stayed near the center of the house, watching, always watching. By late afternoon, the storm arrived. Not gradually, all at once. The wind hit the house with a force that made the walls shudder. Snow followed immediately, thick and heavy, swallowing the world beyond the windows in seconds. The sound was constant, relentless, not loud enough to overwhelm, or just enough to remind them that it wasn't stopping anytime soon. Adrian stood near the window, watching as the trees bent under the weight of it. This'll bury the road, Lucas muttered behind him. Probably, Adrian replied. Emily stepped closer, arms folded tightly around herself. How long does something like this last? She asked. Adrian didn't answer right away. Long enough, he said finally. A sudden crack split through the noise. Sharp. Close. Everyone froze. Ranger was already moving. The dog bolted toward the back of the house, his body low, focused. Adrian followed without thinking, his boots hitting the floor hard as he moved. They reached the rear hallway just as another sound echoed a heavy, splintering shift. The back wall had taken the hit. A large pine branch, torn loose by the wind, had crashed against the side of the house. The impact had cracked one of the outer beams, the wood splitting just enough to weaken the structure. Snow began to push through the gap. Slow, steady, unstoppable, if left alone. Adrian didn't hesitate. "Lucas!" he called. They worked fast. Lucas grabbed tools without needing direction. His face had changed. Not panicked, not afraid. Focused, sharpened, the way men looked when something real needed to be done. Martha moved furniture away from the wall, her movements precise, controlled. Emily stood frozen for half a second, then stepped forward. "Tell me what to do." Adrian glanced at her, then nodded. "Hold this." He pressed a wooden brace into her hands. Don't let it shift. She nodded once. Didn't argue. Didn't hesitate again. The wind howled through the crack. Cold air poured into the house, biting, relentless. Adrian and Lucas worked side by side, reinforcing the damaged beam with whatever they could find. Old planks, metal brackets, nails driven in fast and hard. The structure groaned under the pressure, but it held. Barely. Time blurred. Minutes stretched. Or maybe it was hours. No one spoke more than necessary. Plus, no one stopped. The storm outside didn't care. But inside, something changed. When it was done, they stepped back, breathing hard. The wall held. The gap sealed temporarily. Imperfectly, but enough. The wind still pressed against it, but it no longer pushed through. Silence followed. Not outside, but inside the room. Heavy. Earned. Emily leaned back against the wall, her hands shaking slightly. "I didn't think," she started, then stopped. Martha handed her a cup without a word. Lucas wiped his hands on his jacket, exhaling slowly. "That'll hold," he said. Adrian nodded. "Yeah." Ranger returned to the center of the room. He didn't check the wall again. Didn't circle. He simply lay down. As if the danger had passed. As if that was enough. The storm continued into the night, but inside the house, they stayed. Together. Not because they had to. Because they chose to. Adrian sat near the window later, watching the snow bury the world outside. The road was gone now. The valley erased. Whilst nothing remained but white and wind and the quiet understanding that no one was leaving any time soon. Behind him, voices moved softly through the house. Martha, Lucas, Emily. People who had come for different reasons, who had stayed for one. Adrian rested his hand absently against the back of Ranger's neck. The dog didn't move. Didn't need to. For the first time since he had arrived. The house didn't feel like something he was passing through. It felt like something that had held, and had been held in return. "I'm still selling it," Adrian said quietly. The words came out softer this time. Less certain. Almost like a question. The storm outside didn't answer, but something inside him did. Not yet in words, just a weight, a warmth, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. Morning did not arrive. It revealed itself. Slowly, carefully, like something unsure whether it was welcome. Adrian stood at the window before anyone else stirred, watching the storm's aftermath unfold across the valley. The world had been rewritten overnight. Snow lay thick and unbroken over everything, the road, the trees, the rooftops below softening edges, hiding flaws, making everything look quieter than it truly was. But silence, he knew, could lie. Behind him, the house held the faint, layered sounds of people who had not yet decided to leave. A chair shifting. A quiet step. The low hum of the stove settling back into warmth. Ranger stood beside him, his body steady, his breath slow. The dog's gaze moved across the landscape, not searching, not reacting, just absorbing, as if measuring something Adrian couldn't name. "You always do that," Adrian murmured. Ranger didn't respond. He never needed to. The road remained buried. Lucas confirmed it after stepping out briefly, boots sinking deep into the snow before he returned, shaking his head. "Give it a day," he said. "Maybe 2. Martha nodded, already moving through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, reheating what remained of the soup. Emily lingered near the doorway, her arms folded loosely, her eyes drawn toward the window more often than she realized. No one asked to leave. No one needed to. By midday, the house had settled into a strange kind of rhythm. Not crowded, not uncomfortable, just shared. Adrian found himself fixing small things without being asked. A loose hinge near the back room, a draft along the window frame upstairs. Tasks that once would have felt meaningless now carried weight, not because they mattered, but because someone else might notice if they weren't done. It unsettled him, more than the storm had. The knock came in the early afternoon, sharp, unexpected. Adrian froze for half a second, then moved. Ranger was already at the door. Still. Alert. Adrian opened it. The man standing there did not belong to the storm. He looked like someone who arrived after things had already been decided. Caleb Turner. Early 40s, tall, clean-cut in a way that felt deliberate rather than natural. His dark hair was neatly styled despite the weather, his jaw clean-shaven, his expression composed to the point of calculation. His coat charcoal wool, tailored, stood in quiet contrast to the rough practicality of everything else in the valley. His boots were clean. Too clean. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand. "Mr. Hale," he said smoothly. Adrian didn't move from the doorway. "Who's asking?" Caleb smiled, not warmly, not coldly, just enough. "Caleb Turner, real estate consultant." There it was. Adrian felt it settle in his chest, heavy, expected. "I was told you might still be considering offers," Caleb continued, his voice even. "Given the property's location, there's significant interest, especially now." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "Now?" he repeated. Caleb glanced past him, briefly taking in the interior of the house, the signs of recent activity, the subtle evidence that it was no longer empty. "Developments moving forward," he said. "Storm or no storm?" A pause. "This land won't stay quiet for long." Behind Adrian, the room had gone still. Not silent. Aware. Martha had stopped moving. Lucas stood near the wall, arms crossed. Emily didn't step forward. But she didn't leave either. Adrian stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Cold air hit immediately. Sharp. Clear. "What do you want?" he asked. Caleb adjusted his grip on the briefcase slightly. "A conversation," he said. "An opportunity." He opened the case just enough to reveal documents inside contracts, figures, and numbers that carried weight in ways people often pretended they didn't. "You're sitting on one of the most valuable pieces of land in this area," Caleb continued. "With the right timing, you could walk away with more than enough to never think about it again." Adrian didn't look at the papers. Didn't need to. "I wasn't planning on thinking about it anyway," he said. Caleb studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then this becomes simple." The door behind Adrian opened, not loudly, just enough. Ranger stepped out. He moved past Adrian without hesitation, stopped in front of Caleb. Close. Still. The dog's posture wasn't aggressive, not defensive, but there was something in the way he stood, head level, shoulders steady, that made the air shift. Caleb didn't step back, but his hand tightened slightly around the briefcase. For a brief second, his composure cracked. Adrian noticed. He always noticed. "What's your offer?" Adrian asked. Caleb exhaled once, steadying himself, then named a number, and it hung in the air, heavy, real. Enough to fix everything. Enough to erase everything. Adrian didn't react. Not outwardly. But something inside him shifted. "You'll need to decide quickly," Caleb added. "Interest like this doesn't wait." Adrian nodded slowly. "I know." Caleb closed the briefcase. "I'll give you a day," he said. "Maybe 2. Then he turned, walked back down the hill, leaving the number behind him like something that didn't need to be repeated. Adrian stood there for a long moment, the cold pressing in, the silence settling back. Ranger remained beside him, watching. Not the man. The house. Inside, the air felt different. Not heavier. Just thinner. Lucas spoke first. "That guy's not wrong," he said. Martha didn't look at him. "That doesn't make him right," she replied. Emily said nothing. She stood near the window again, her reflection faint against the glass. Adrian stepped inside, closed the door. "I'm selling it," he said. The words came out sharper this time, more certain. Almost. No one argued. That was worse. Lucas nodded once. "Figured." Martha turned back to the stove. Emily looked down. Ranger moved to the center of the room and lay down, facing the door. The rest of the day passed quietly. Too quietly. Adrian moved through the house without purpose now. The small repairs felt different, unfinished, unnecessary. The weight of the decision pressed in, settling into everything he touched. He opened drawers, closed them, looked at things he didn't recognize, things that didn't belong to him, things that had never asked to. By evening, the light had shifted again. Softer. Colder. Adrian found himself in the living room, standing near the chair, the one he had noticed on the first day. He didn't sit in it. Not yet. He just stood there, looking, trying to understand something that refused to become clear. Behind him, voices moved quietly. Martha, Lucas, Emily, low, measured. It was like people already preparing for something they didn't want to say out loud. "They'll leave," Adrian said suddenly. No one answered. "They won't stay if I sell," he added. Lucas shifted his weight. "No," he said. "They won't." Martha didn't turn. "That's not why they came," she said. Emily's voice was softer. "But it's why they stayed." Adrian closed his eyes for a second. Just a second. Long enough to feel it. The weight of it. Not the house, not the money. The people. Ranger stood, walked over, pressed lightly against Adrian's leg, not asking, not comforting. Just there. "I'm still selling it," Adrian said. This time, it sounded like something breaking. The house woke before the people did. Adrian felt it in the way the air moved. Not colder, not warmer, just different, like something had already made a decision, and everything else was catching up to it. He stood in the kitchen, hands resting lightly on the edge of the counter, staring at the untouched papers Caleb had left behind the day before. They sat where he had dropped them, neat, precise, indifferent. Numbers didn't change overnight, but people did. Behind him, the house breathed in quiet layers. Lucas was the first to move. Bootsteps measured, deliberate crossed the wooden floor from the far room. The sound carried a kind of restraint now, as if even he had learned that noise meant more in a place like this. "Road's clearing," Lucas said, stepping into the kitchen. His voice was steady, but something underneath it had shifted. He looked the same flannel shirt, Worn jacket, hands rough from years of work, but his posture held a quiet finality. "Plow came through early this morning," he added. "You can get out now." Adrian nodded once, didn't turn. "Good," he said. The word felt hollow. Martha followed soon after. She didn't speak at first. She moved through the kitchen the same way she always had, methodical, efficient, as if the act of preparing something warm still mattered, even when there was no reason left for it to. But this time, she didn't unpack anything. She packed the remaining jars, the folded cloths, things that had quietly belonged to her presence here. Adrian watched her hands for a moment. "They don't have to go," he said. Martha paused, just briefly, then continued. "That's not how this works," she replied. Her voice was calm, not unkind, just certain. Emily lingered the longest. She stood near the window again, as she always did, and her reflection faint against the pale morning light. Her blonde hair was loosely tied back, strands falling free around her face. Her green eyes moved across the valley, not searching, not hoping, memorizing. Adrian recognized that look. He had worn it himself once. "What will you do?" he asked quietly. Emily didn't turn. "I'll figure something out," she said. A pause. "People always do." She almost smiled, but didn't. Ranger moved between them, not restless, not anxious. He walked slowly from room to room, pausing near each person as if marking something invisible. His amber eyes tracked every movement, every shift in posture, every silence that carried more weight than words. When he stopped beside Emily, she reached down instinctively, her fingers brushing through the thick fur at his neck. He leaned into it. Just slightly. Permission. By midday, the house had begun to empty. Not suddenly. Gradually. Like a tide pulling back. Lucas left first. He didn't say much. Didn't need to. He stood in the doorway, one hand resting against the frame, his eyes moving once through the room. "You did good work," he said. Adrian nodded. "So did you." Lucas gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. "Doesn't mean it lasts." Then he stepped out into the cold. Didn't look back. Martha followed not long after. She paused near the kitchen table, her gaze resting briefly on the empty space where the crate had been. "Your grandmother knew what this place was," she said. Adrian looked at her. "She knew people needed somewhere to come back to," Martha continued. A beat. Even if they didn't stay. Adrian swallowed. Didn't answer. Martha nodded once, then left. Emily was the last. She stood in the doorway longer than the others, long enough for the silence to settle between them. "You're going to sell it," she said. Not a question. Adrian nodded. "Yes." She studied him for a moment, then looked past him into the house, at the chair, the hallway, the quiet. "I hope it's enough," she said. "For what?" he asked. She met his eyes. "For what you're leaving behind." Then she stepped outside. The door closed softly behind her. The house fell silent. Not the kind of silence that followed absence, the kind that followed truth. Ranger stood in the center of the room. Still. Then, slowly he turned and walked straight toward the hallway. This time he didn't stop. He pushed the door open. Adrian froze. The door had always been closed. Always. Lucas had mentioned it, casually, as if it didn't matter. But now it stood open. Just enough. Ranger disappeared inside. Adrian followed. Not quickly. Not slowly, just because there was no other choice. The room beyond was smaller than he expected. Dust lay thick over everything, undisturbed. Except the air felt different. Not stale, not abandoned, just waiting. There was a desk, old, wood worn smooth at the edges, a single drawer slightly open. Adrian stepped closer. His fingers hovered for a moment before pulling it fully out. Inside, a stack of notebooks, neatly arranged, each one labeled. Names, dates, places, not a list. Not exactly. More like stories. Adrian picked one up, opened it. The handwriting was familiar. Steady. Careful. His grandmother's. Martha came by again today. Didn't ask for help, never does. Left food anyway. I think she worries that if she stops, something will break that she won't be able to fix. Adrian exhaled slowly. His chest tightened. Another page. Lucas fixed the back steps without saying a word. Stayed longer than he needed to. I don't think he remembers what it's like to leave before things are done. Adrian closed his eyes for a second. Just a second. Another. Emily still stands by the window when she thinks no one is watching. I wish she knew she doesn't have to wait for something to stay. The room felt smaller now. Or maybe it was just him. Ranger sat beside him. Still. Watching. Not the room. Him. And Adrian let the notebook fall closed in his hands. He looked around again. The desk, the walls, the quiet. This wasn't a record. It was something else. Something he hadn't understood. Not until now. They weren't just people, he said quietly. The words barely carried. They were hers. Ranger didn't move, didn't need to. Adrian stood there for a long moment, then turned, walked back into the main room. The house felt different again. Not emptier, not fuller, just clearer. The papers still sat on the table, waiting. Adrian walked over, picked them up, looked at them properly this time. Numbers, signatures, finality. He stared at them for a long moment. Then, set them back down. I'm still selling it, he said. But this time, the words didn't land. The house did not feel empty, not anymore. Adrian stood in the doorway long after the last sound of tires had faded from the road below. The valley stretched out beneath him, pale and quiet under the late morning light. The snow beginning to soften at the edges where the sun touched it. The world had started moving again. But something inside the house had stopped. Not in a broken way, in a decided one. He stepped back inside slowly, closing the door behind him. The sound was softer than he expected. Everything was softer now. The chair in the corner still stood where it always had. The table still held the papers Caleb had left behind. The hallway still led toward the room he had opened the day before. Nothing had changed, and everything had. Ranger moved ahead of him, not with urgency, not with purpose, just familiarity. And the German shepherd crossed the room, his gait slower now, measured, as if he understood something Adrian was only beginning to feel. His sable coat caught the light in quiet layers of gray, cream, and black. His amber eyes moved across the space, not searching, recognizing. Adrian exhaled slowly. You knew, he said under his breath. Ranger didn't turn, didn't need to. The papers remained on the table, untouched, waiting. Adrian walked over and picked them up again. This time he read them. Properly. The numbers didn't change. They still meant what they had meant yesterday. Freedom. Distance. A clean exit. He flipped through the pages once. Twice. Then stopped. His thumb rested against the edge of the final sheet, the place where a signature would go. It would be easy. It had always been easy. That was the problem. He set the papers down, not gently, not harshly, just with enough weight to make them stay where they were. The knock came again. It's not unexpected this time, not hesitant either. Adrian didn't move immediately. He knew who it would be. Ranger had already turned toward the door. Still, waiting. When Adrian opened it, Caleb Turner stood exactly as before. Same coat, same posture, same controlled expression. But something in his eyes had shifted. Less certain. As if even he could feel the difference in the air. "Mr. Hale," Caleb said. Adrian stepped aside. "Come in." Caleb entered slowly, his gaze moving across the room, taking in the details, the changes, the absence of people, the presence of something else. "This won't take long," he said, setting his briefcase on the table. "I imagine it won't," Adrian replied. Caleb opened the case, removed the documents, smoothed them out with precise, practiced movements. "You've had time to consider the offer," he said. Adrian leaned lightly against the wall. "I have." Caleb nodded. "Then we can finalize." "I'm not selling." The words landed clean. No hesitation, no wait. Just truth. Caleb paused. Not long, but long enough. "I see," he said. But he didn't. Not yet. "This is a significant opportunity," he continued. "You may not get another like it." Adrian nodded. "I know." Caleb studied him. Carefully. "You're choosing to stay," he said. It wasn't a question. Adrian shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. "I'm choosing not to leave." Ranger stepped forward. Not toward Adrian. Toward Caleb. He stopped close enough that the space between them felt intentional. Then, slowly, the dog turned his head and looked back at Adrian, not waiting, not asking, just holding him there, as if the choice had already been made. Caleb followed the movement. His gaze flickered between the man and the dog. Something in his expression shifted again. Subtle, but real. "You understand what this means," he said quietly. Adrian did, more than Caleb realized. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Caleb closed the briefcase. The sound was final. "Well," he said after a moment, "then I suppose there's nothing more to discuss." He stood, adjusted his coat. But before he turned to leave, he hesitated. Just slightly. "This place," he said, glancing once around the room. "It must matter more than it looks." Adrian's gaze followed his. The chair, the hallway, the quiet. "It does," he said. "Just not in the way you think." Caleb nodded once, then left. No argument, no persuasion, just the sound of the door opening, closing, gone. The silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. Adrian stood still for a long moment, then moved, not toward the papers, toward the door. Outside, the air had softened. The snow had begun to melt in small, uneven patches, revealing the ground beneath, dark, Imperfect, real. The road was visible again. Clear. Open. Leading away. He stepped onto the porch. Ranger followed. The dog stood beside him, close enough that Adrian could feel the warmth of his body against the cold air. They looked out over the valley together. Movement caught Adrian's eye. Down the hill. A figure. Then another. Lucas. Walking slowly, hands in his pockets, his posture carrying that same quiet stubbornness. Martha. A few steps behind, her movements steady, controlled. Emily. Further back, hesitant, but still coming. They didn't rush, didn't call out. They just walked. Back. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Not sharp, not sudden, just right. When they reached the bottom of the hill, they stopped. Not crossing onto the property. Not yet. Waiting. Adrian stepped forward. One step. Then another. Down the porch. Into the snow. "You're still here," Lucas said. It wasn't a question. Adrian nodded. "Yeah." Martha studied him. Longer this time. "What changed?" she asked. Adrian thought about it. The storm. The room. The notebooks. The silence. Ranger. "Nothing," he said. Then, after a beat, "Everything." Emily smiled. This time, it stayed. So they walked back up the hill together. No ceremony, no announcement, just footsteps in melting snow. Inside, the house felt different again. Not quieter, not louder, just alive. Adrian stood near the center of the room, watching as they moved naturally into place. Lucas near the wall, already noticing what needed fixing. Martha in the kitchen, her hands returning to familiar work. Emily near the window, but not standing still this time. Ranger settled near the doorway. Watching. Always watching. Adrian exhaled slowly. "I'm not selling it," he said. The words didn't echo. They settled. No one reacted immediately. Then, Lucas nodded. Martha turned slightly. Emily closed her eyes for just a second. Outside, the snow continued to melt. The valley returned, piece by piece. Adrian looked around the house one last time. Not as someone passing through, as someone staying. He moved to the table, picked up the papers, folded them once, twice, then set them aside. Not thrown away, not destroyed. Just no longer needed. "We'll need to fix the back wall properly," Lucas said. Martha added, "And the pipes before the next freeze." Emily glanced toward the window. "And maybe keep the lights on." Adrian nodded. "Yeah," he said. "We will." Ranger stood, walked over, pressed lightly against his leg. Outside, the world continued. Inside. Something had begun. In the quiet turning of this story, there was no thunder, no grand miracle that split the sky in two. Just a house that refused to be empty, just a man who chose to stay, and a dog who never stopped listening. Sometimes the miracles we wait for do not arrive as light or voice or sudden change. Sometimes they come as people who show up when they don't have to, as hands that help without asking, as a place that holds you until you are ready to hold something back. Maybe that is how God works. Not always in ways that are loud or undeniable, but in the quiet persistence of grace guiding us through others, through moments we almost ignore, through choices that feel small but change everything. If you are watching this, maybe you are standing in your own moment of decision. What maybe you are about to walk away from something that still has life in it, or maybe you are waiting for a sign. This is your reminder. You don't have to wait for a miracle. You might already be standing inside one. Take a moment today to look around your life. Who showed up for you? What place has held you together when you were ready to leave? And what would happen if you chose to stay? If this story touched you in any way, share it with someone who might need it. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And what is one thing in your life you are grateful for right now? And if you believe that stories like this matter, subscribe to the channel so we can keep telling them together. May God bless you, guide your steps, and place the right people in your life at the right time. And may you never miss the quiet miracles that are already happening around you.